So today we're going to talk a little bit about J.K. Rowling and people accusing her of being against transgender individuals. We're going to look at kind of some of the philosophy behind that and how there was a political philosopher named Thomas Spragens. He wrote a book called Civic Liberalism, Reflections on Our Democratic Ideals, and he basically predicted this happening, like the scenario with J.K. Rowling, some of the scenario some of the really situations that are occurring with identity politics. So first off, this is a graphic showing what was called the 5 Faces of Oppression, and it was a philosopher named Iris Marion Young who wrote about this. She wrote that the 5 Faces of Oppression are exploitation, marginalization, powerlessness, cultural imperialism, and violence. And Thomas Sprague, in his book, he really critiqued some of her ideas. Another one of her ideas, so she was big into kind of the idea of intersectionality, and she believed that oppressed groups were going to band together and that they were going to help one another out. And he basically went against this idea and was saying like why that wasn't going to work out in his book. And so I'll read the line from it. So he's talking about Iris Young, and he claims, she imagines that similar experiences of oppression will create social bonds without realizing that if all that matters to me and my self-realization occurs within the bounds of my particular social group, then the only thing that matters to me politically will be the relief of my own group's oppression. Indeed, to the very extent that other groups are instrumentalities of other identities / ways of life, they must be seen ultimately as by their very existence being contributory to my oppression. So he talks about how basically you'll have, if that's really what's like promoted in society, if basically people's own groups and their own perceived oppression, if that's really what is being emphasized to them, how they're not going to just unite hands and be in harmony with these other groups that they deem as oppressed, but they're going to be fighting each other basically. They're going to be competing with one another for what they view as limited resources. So where this fits into J.K. Rowling and other women, you have feminists who feel that women have been oppressed. And for a lot of history, that's absolutely true. They couldn't vote, and they didn't have a lot of protections with marriage and divorce that they now have. Like, that's a fair statement. They were kept out of the job market. But now these women are being told that they have more privilege than trans people, and basically trans people, they need to just open their arms up wide and just bring these people in, and that if someone claims they are a woman, then they are. You can't question that. So we're going to watch this video real quick of just J.K. Rowling, and we'll keep talking just about this concept.
The woman who is likely the world's best-known children's author is defending herself against growing accusations of transphobia. This is J.K. Rowling, the creator of Harry Potter, of course, who sparked outrage last weekend with a series of controversial tweets about trans women. She's now written an essay on her blog addressing the accusations and saying her opinions stem from her own experience with domestic violence. That's why she's been pushed to advocate for women's rights, she says. Let's bring in Renee Filippone, who's in London to follow the story. As I mentioned, this is a growing controversy, Renee. We join this story already in progress, if you will, but more and more voices critical of J.K. Rowling.
In her movies, people, calling for her publishers and the movie companies that produced her movies to do something about it. And it all starts back and goes back to last weekend. And that's when J.K. Rowling responded on Twitter to a headline she read online that read, "Creating a more equal post-COVID-19 world for people who menstruate." And she responded by saying, I'm sure there is a word for these people, followed by a number of deliberately misspelled versions of the word woman. Now, there was instant backlash to that. She was accused of being transphobic, so she wanted to further clarify herself and sent out another tweet over the weekend. That one said, quote, "I know and love trans people, but erasing the concept of sex removes the ability of many to meaningfully discuss their lives. It isn't hate to speak the truth." Now, again, as you mentioned, an essay. She's trying to explain herself further, a lengthy essay, saying her position in part comes from being a victim of both domestic and sexual abuse. And what she says is, in mentioning these things now is not in an attempt to garner sympathy, but out of solidarity with the huge numbers of women who have histories like mine, who've been slurred as bigots for having concerns about single-sex spaces. Now, when she talks about single-sex spaces, she's talking about bathrooms and change rooms. She pointed in her essay to concerns she has about a proposal in Scotland that would allow trans people to change their sex on their birth certificates to what they identify with. And she has said, you know, if you throw the doors open of bathrooms to any man who feels like he's a woman, then you open the doors to any and all men who wish to come inside.
Some of the voices who've been critical include the stars of her own movie, including the biggest star, Daniel Radcliffe.
That's right. Harry Potter himself responded, posting a blog post, an essay on a site called the Trevor Project website, and that's a nonprofit agency that supports LGBTQ youth. And in that statement, he wrote, transgender women are women. Any statement to the contrary erases the identity and dignity of transgender people and goes against all advice given by professional healthcare associations who have far more expertise on this matter than either Joe or I. He also added that he hopes her comments don't tarnish the experience that fans have had with her books and the movies. And we've also heard from GLAAD, the LGBTQ rights group, who are calling her tweets cruel and inaccurate, saying that she continues to align herself with an ideology which willfully distorts facts about gender identity and people who are trans. In 2020, there is no excuse for targeting trans people. And Heather, it's important to note here as well that this isn't the first time she's been called transphobic. Late last year, she came out in support of a researcher who was fired for saying that transgender people can't change their biological sex. So this is definitely not the first time she's in hot water. She is very outspoken on Twitter and is getting a lot of backlash that continues to grow.
Okay, we'll check back in with you on the story as it continues to grow as well.
So this almost mirrors exactly what Thomas Spragens was writing about, and I think he wrote this book around like in the 1990s. Again, I'll read this line. I'll read a line or two again. Okay, if all that matters to me in my self-realization occurs within the bounds of my particular social group, then the only thing that matters to me politically will be the relief of my own group's oppression. Indeed, to the very extent that other groups are instrumentalities of other identities or ways of life, they must be seen ultimately as by their very existence being contributory to my oppression. And so J.K. Rowling and other feminists that are saying, like, hey, with sexual violence, with the history of feminism, we want to have the idea of sex maintained. We want to have that preserved because of it. It's like everything related to the feminist movement. So they feel that way, and then you have transgender individuals that are saying, well, that's excluding us, and we're being oppressed. And so you can see just the accuracy of his predictions there. Understand, when it comes to affirmative action, there are Asian individuals that are upset with it, and that they recognize it for what it is, and they feel that they're being discriminated against. And there might be resentment with Asians and Hispanic and black people that are benefiting from affirmative action. So this idea with identity politics, that everyone's just going to link arms and unite and fight against the super privileged straight white man, it just isn't that simple. Overall, who is more oppressed? A white gay man or a white straight woman? What about a white gay man or a black straight man? Or a white straight woman and a black straight man? There can be ideas of layers of oppression, and I can appreciate the fact that disability is being talked about. I think that we should definitely try to improve society for people with disabilities, but there are questions that get brought up with identity politics and that get brought up with the idea of intersectionality. Is a black girl who happens to be lesbian or transgender, if let's say she was the daughter of a celebrity or even a surgeon, if she grew up really wealthy, is she automatically more oppressed than a white guy that grew up in a trailer park whose parents were doing drugs and beating him? That's a hard point to argue. Going back to J.K. Rowling, just keep in mind she has already made a ton of money from the book. Some of those actors, even though they do have wealth, they are wanting to get more roles. Daniel Radcliffe and Emma Watson, Eddie Redmayne, they're wanting to get other roles. And there is a trend that we're seeing now where there's literally a mob that are trying to silence people on social media if they don't like their ideas, if they believe that those ideas are harmful. They are trying to label people as racist or as sexist or as transphobic or Islamophobic. And sometimes the people that they're accusing, they might be those things, but sometimes it's getting taken too far. The idea that Sam Harris is this bigoted man and he's so Islamophobic, like that just doesn't line up with reality. That doesn't line up with his words. The ideas that some people are saying and they're just getting blasted for, it's literally a mob trying to shape society and trying to intimidate people from speaking out in the future. They're trying to send a message. It's like, hey, just shut up or else we will target you and you're going to lose your job and you're going to be hated if you don't toe the line and conform. In a sense, some of these people, you could say they believe in critical theories, critical race theory, critical gender theory, critical queer theory. You could say that there is an element of authoritarianism to it. And that's not to say that like Trump's right and his supporters are right. Like Trump was out of control. Trump had authoritarian leanings as well. It's just to show that it can be on the left and on the right. Thanks for watching. I'll have more videos coming out on history, politics, psychology, philosophy. Subscribe and like the video, please.
Others.